Okay. So we are on Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph. Let's take a look at the Gemara. Omar Rava. Omar Rava is at about 12 lines from the bottom. On Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph is Omar Rava. So Omar Rava. So Rava says the following point. The last thing that we said, the Gemara said that once we said that you have to go ahead and make Havdalah on a cup of wine. 1 second. The Gemara said once you have to make Havdalah b'tfilah, not only you have to make not only
Boker Tov, Rabbi.
Mona Yosef. Let's get now clearing the screen over here. Yosef, how you doing, Yosef Tzaddik? How's everything? Yosef, how you doing? Everything good?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just like sending a message to other people to come join the class.
Okay, very good. The Gemara said that at the end they said, Hamavdu b'tfilah, once you have the ability, once you have the financial ability to say Havdalah on a cup of wine, Gemara said earlier, Hamavdil b'tfilah sarah she'avdil alakos. Gemara said that if you are capable of buying wine, they did not uproot the din of Havdalah on the cup of wine. They only said when you're not capable, when you're not able to buy wine, then it's enough. The financial problems and financial reasons, if you can't afford the wine, then it's enough to go ahead and say Atachanatanu, and you don't need a cup of wine. But if a person has the ability to go ahead and afford a cup of wine, so it's not enough to go ahead and say Havdalah just Atachanatanu. Morning Avram. You have to also say, not only have to say Atachanatanu, you also have to say Havdalah on a cup of wine, right? That's where we ended last time. The Gemara said that when they put it back in the tefillah, what happened was, as you recall, first they instituted Havdalah in the prayers, Atachanatanu Amidah. Then after they made Atachanatanu Amidah, because they didn't want to institute it on the cup of wine because the people couldn't afford the wine. Then they went ahead and then they instituted it back on a cup of wine when they could afford a cup of wine. They said you should make Havdalah on a cup of wine. And when they did that, they stopped doing it in the tefillah. They stopped saying Atachanatanu in the tefillah. They only said it on the cup of wine. And because of that, there was a question, where did they say Atachanatanu? Did they say Atachanatanu in the bracha of Chonin Hadat? Did they say Atachanatanu in the bracha of Modim? Did they say a special independent bracha of Atachanatanu? New bracha, not just an insert in the previous bracha? Because there was a time period that they stopped saying it in the tefillah, and they said it on a cup of wine. So then, when the people became poor, eventually, and they couldn't afford it on a cup of wine, and therefore they had to bring it back into tefillah, then there was a question exactly where in the tefillah should you put the Atachanatanu? Because there's been a period of time that they did not say Atachanatanu, because they only did it on a cup of wine, so they forgot what the original enactment was. And then, now, therefore, there's different opinions exactly where to say that Atachanatanu, and they said that even though we're saying Atachanatanu in tefillah, but still, if you have the ability to afford a cup of wine, you're supposed to go ahead and what? Obviously, you're still supposed to do it on a cup of wine. The only reason why you would do it is only if you cannot afford a cup of wine. Morning Morris. But if you can afford a cup of wine, you have to go ahead and say, if you can afford a cup of wine, you have to say you have to say Havdalah on the cup of wine as well. Okay, that's what came out from the Gemara, and then the Gemara said, "Itmanami Rav Chia bar Abba Rav Yochanan Anshe Knesset Hagdola, Anshe Knesset Hagdola Tiknu Lehem Yisrael Brachot Tfilot Kedushot Havdalot." They went ahead and they instituted Anshe Knesset Hagdola, the men of the Great Assembly, instituted Kiddush Havdalah. Good morning, Joseph. How are you? Good to see you, Joseph. Welcome back.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Welcome back. So on Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph 33a, the men of the Great Assembly instituted Kiddush. They've instituted brachot on food and tefillot, prayers, the way we pray, Kiddush Havdalah, Betchila Kavu Betfilah. They first instituted, we say Havdalah in prayers, then Heshiru, when the people became wealthy, Kavu ala kos. Then they said you should not only do it in prayers, because a cup of wine is much more chashuv. To say Havdalah on a cup of wine is much more important and better. It's much more honor than saying it in tefillah. And therefore the rabbi says, this is how the progression. The rabbi said, stop saying it in the tefillah, only on a cup of wine. That's where it's much better. And then when the people became poor, Hanu chazdu v'kavu b'tefillah. They went ahead and then they said that you have to do it back to the tefillah because the people couldn't afford it. But then they said, but that's for the general community. But if you could afford it, they should go ahead and you should go ahead and make Havdalah not only in the tefillah, two things. They said in the tefillah and also on the cup of wine. Now, Itmanami, Rav Yosef, the Gemara says that this drives this point home, that other rabbis also agree to this point, that if you could afford the fact that you say Havdalah in the tefillah, you still go ahead and say Havdalah on the cup of wine. Now,
Rabbi, which sentence are we up to?
Rabbi.
Thank you.
What do you want to say?
What line are we up to?
We're now Amar Rabba, Amar Rava. We're in the long, wide lines towards the bottom.
Okay.
About 12 lines from the bottom. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 lines from the bottom.
Thank you, Rabbi.
The third of the line is the Amri. The Amri is the first word of the line. The middle of the line is Amar Rava. You have it? Amar Rava.
I have it. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Joseph, you have it?
I have it, Rabbi. Thank you. Thank you.
Very good. Amar Rava. Umos vinin ashmaitin. We're going to ask on our Gemara. Ta'av lo hiske gevurot geshamim. If a person did not say Mashiv Ruach Umarde Geshem b'tchiyat hametim, in the bracha of tchiyat hametim, in the winter time, if a person did not say Mashiv Ruach Umarde Geshem in the winter, or she'ela b'birkat hashanim, or you were supposed to say Baruch Aleinu, or as the Ashkenazim called Saint Talamat Levracha, and you did not say, it was the winter time, it was, let's say, December something, December 6th or whatever it was, that you're supposed to say V'sein Talamat Levracha, and you did not say V'sein Talamat Levracha, right? So what's the law? So the law is that since you needed to say V'sein Talamat Levracha, and you didn't say it, so you have to repeat the Amidah, Mazir Oto. And it also says if you didn't say Mash Baruch Amarde Geshem, you have to repeat the Amidah. And remember we said last week, that's only if you did not say Morid Hatal. But if you said Morid Hatal, you were supposed to say, let's say today, you were supposed to say Mash Baruch Amarde Geshem. But you didn't say Mash Baruch Amarde Geshem. But what did you do? You said Morid Hatal, you don't have to repeat the Amidah. The Gemara here is saying if a person said nothing, he said, Ata Gibol Alam Hashem Mechayim Meisem Ata Rav Lo Shia Mechalka Chayim B'Chesed. He didn't say Mashi Baruch Amarde Geshem, or he did not say Morid Hatal. He has to repeat the Amidah. If you didn't say anything, but if you said Morid Hatal, you do not need to repeat. But you should know,
Rabbi, we're in a better
Pesach-
position. We're in a
What'd you
better
say, Mike?
position. We're in a better position than the Ashkenazim because anyway we're gonna say either or.
right, so the Sephardim have a gain on that deal. But when it comes to Pesach, when we switch over by Musaf, we switch from Mashiv Ruach Mordei Geshem to Mordei Atol. So if you made a mistake, and let's say you did not make the switch when you were supposed to make the switch, and let's say you forgot and you kept on going throughout, if you said Mashiv Ruach Mordei Geshem, then you would have to repeat the Amidah when it comes to this coming switch. You're only covered, the Sephardim have the advantage 6 months a year, and during the time that we move to Mashiv Ruach Mordei Geshem from Mordei Atol, you're covered. But if you said Mashiv Ruach Mordei Geshem when you weren't supposed to, that's no good. So the Gemara says, Havdalah b'chonin adat.
That's no, Rabbi, sorry, that's no good. You repeat the Amidah if you said Moridatal instead of, if you said Mashiv Ruach instead of Moridatal.
If you said, right, exactly. If you said Mashiv Ruach instead of Mordei Atol, you would have to repeat the Amidah.
If you don't know what you did, if you don't remember what you did.
Usually we say it takes 30 days for a person to know that he's doing the right thing. So I would presume that if a person is not sure if he said the right thing, it's most likely he said the wrong thing because he wasn't 30 days into saying the right thing.
Rabbi, 30 days? I told you it's 21 days.
30 days. Takes 30 days. It makes the chazak makes you know that you're doing it. It takes 30 days to be in the real groove. After 30 days, then you don't have to worry. Then you know you most probably did it right. Now, havdalah b'chonin adat. If a person forgot to say havdalah and chonin adat, he did not say atachanantanu. Okay, he forgot to say atachanantanu. So what's the law? Ein machzirin oto. It says over here that you do not repeat the Amidah if you forgot Havdalah and Chonin Adat. Why? Why don't you repeat the Amidah if you forgot Havdalah and Chonin Adat? Because if you forgot Havdalah and Chonin Adat, you're able to say it on the cup of wine. Since you're able to say it on the cup of wine, so that's going to cover you, and you don't have to repeat that midah. Joseph, is it clear what the Gemara is saying?
Absolutely. So you can make up for it after if you omitted it in the Shemona Esrei. I find that very interesting. You can make up for it because you're going to say because you're able to say Havdalah on a cup of wine. Right.
So the Gemara is saying that the language of the Gemara that says you're able to make it up on a cup of wine sounds like that it's in general you don't need to use a cup of wine, but here in this situation you have a way to fix it, because the language of the Gemara. Why does the Gemara say you could? Because you could say you're able to say I could say it on the cup of wine. Why doesn't the Gemara say because I am going to make it up? I am going to go ahead and say it on the cup of wine. The language because I am able to say it on the cup of wine sounds like this. If I want, like Rashi says, if I want to not to have to repeat the Amidah, I have something what I could do. What could I do? I could go ahead and say it on the cup of wine. But if I would have done it right, if I would have said Atachanatanu in the Tefillah, I don't need to say it on the cup of wine. So that's the Gemara's question. You just told me that later on the rabbi said that when people could afford wine, it's not enough to say Atachanatanu in the prayers. You also are required, and that's the halacha today, that not only we say it in the prayers, we need to say it on a cup of wine. But the language of this Breita, seems to say that you're not obligated to say it on the cup of wine. Because the language of the Breita seems to indicate only if I forgot Havdalah, I forgot Atachanatanu in the Tefillah, I don't have to repeat the Amidah because I have the ability to say it on a cup of wine. Why doesn't the Gemara say, not because I have the ability to say it on a cup of wine, because I'm going to say it on the cup of wine. It's not because I have the ability, it's because I'm going to do it. And that's what I'm going to do. So the fact that the Gemara says, because I have an option, I have a way to say it on the cup of wine, seems to indicate it's not something that I must do, it's something that's voluntarily if I want to do. And that's a question on the other rabbis. Because the other rabbis said that it's not a voluntary, it's not optional to do it on a cup of wine. You're obligated to do it on the cup of wine. So that's the Gemara's question. The Gemara is challenging. The challenge is, this is the following question. When the rabbis said that the people could not afford wine, and then the rabbi said, do it in the tefillah. But did the rabbi, and they brought it back to the original enactment in tefillah, did they still say that if you could afford any individual who could afford the wine must do it on the cup of wine or not? So the Gemara said before that yes, that even though they brought back the enactment to the way the original did it in prayers, but if the person has the ability to afford it on wine, you have to do it on wine. And the Gemara now seems to say no, that there's no obligation on the wine, even when you could afford it. And that's the Gemara's challenge. And the Gemara responds to the challenge by saying, Lo tema, don't say, don't say because you have the ability to say it on a cup of wine. This is how the Brisa should read. Because you're actually going to say it on the cup of wine. And therefore, because you have an obligation to say it on the cup of wine. And therefore, you do not need to repeat to pray. You don't need to repeat the Amidah. So last night, if someone forgot Atach and Antonu in the Tefillah, he does not need to repeat the Amidah. Why? Because he's going to say it on the cup of wine. Not these, he has the ability to say it, he can say it, if he wants to say it on the cup of wine, he's obligated to say it on the cup of wine. Is that clear to everybody? The Gemara is saying now that the obligation is not just in tefillah. It's not like the original first time the rabbis, the Anshe Knesset Agdola, they instituted specifically in prayer. Now it's both in prayer and where in tefillah. Both is obligation to say Havdalah in both places. It manami, that's what it was said in the Beit Midrash. Amar Binyamin Bar Yefes, Shal Rabbi Yossi es Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yossi asked Rabbi Yochanan b'Sidon, the town of Sidon. And some say Rabbi Shimon ben Yaakov the Minsur. It was a different person who asked Rabbi Yochanan the question. It was Rabbi Shimon ben Yaakov from Sur, and he asked V'ani Shamat, and I heard that when he asked him, Hamavdil b'Tfilah. When you go ahead and you make Havdalah in Tfilah, Sarich sheyavdil alakos olo. When a person went ahead and he said Atach and Antonu, and when a person goes ahead and he says Atach and Antonu, does he need to also say it on the cup of wine or not? V'omalei, and Rabbi Yochanan said Sarich sheyavdil alakos. And Rabbi Yochanan says, yes, you are required to say it on the cup of wine. By the way, you're going to see in the Gemara that it's not going to be universally accepted, this point that we're saying. That we're saying now that you have to both do it in the tefillah and in the cup of wine. But this is what many of these rabbis, the Gemara has proven this, has shown you that many rabbis are on this opinion. The Gemara is going to discuss a opposite situation. What about a guy, he went ahead and he made Havdalah before he davened Arvit. It came the Zman, it was nighttime, it was dark, and he decided I made Havdalah, and then I'm going to pray, and he made Havdalah on a cup of wine, and then I'm going to pray. Does he need to say Havdalah Atach and Antonu in the Amidah if he already said it on the cup of wine? Does everybody hear the question? Does everybody hear the question? Mike, do you hear the question? Joseph, Shmuley, Avram. Everybody
I didn't understand the question, Rabbi.
The question is, he made Havdalah on a cup of wine before he davened Arvit. You hear what he did? And I don't recommend.
So the question is if he have to repeat Atachonantanu if he said Atachonantanu in the Havdalah already.
Right. Does he need to say Atachonantanu at all in the Amidah? Since he already said on the cup of wine, that's the question of the Gemara. Everybody hear the case? He went ahead and he made Havdalah on the cup of wine. Now he wants to know, do I need to say Atachanatanu on Amidah? Do we say, I did it in such a fashion, on a cup of wine, I made Havdalah on a cup of wine. So do we need, and really, they enacted originally in the Tefillah, but maybe the only reason why they enacted originally in the Tefillah, because people couldn't afford the cup of wine. But if I went ahead and I did it on a cup of wine, so maybe I don't need to do it in the Tefillah, because I did it already, and I did it in the most best fashion. Meaning to say, if I went ahead and I said, generally I say Atachanatanu in Tefillah, I say it in the prayer, but I did not do Havdalah in the best way, right? Because I only did it in the prayer, I didn't do it over a cup of wine. Right, Avram, am I clear? But so therefore you could understand, a person says Atachanatanu in prayers, he still needs to say Havdalah on a cup of wine, because a cup of wine is a different level of kavod, a different level of honor, and it's a whole bracha of Havdalah. That we're saying when we're doing on the cup of wine. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hamavdil bein kol l'shachol. It's a whole bracha. It's not just an insert. So I can understand why when I did it in Atachanatanu in prayers in the Amidah, it doesn't cover. I still need to do on the cup of wine if I have the ability, if I can afford a cup of wine. But if I did it on the cup of wine, maybe I should not need to do Havdalah at all in the Tefillah. That's the question of the Gemara. Maybe it's like redundant. It's extra. It's not necessary. Is that clear? That's the Gemara's question. Okay. So the Gemara answers the following. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, yes, you still have to do it in the Tefillah. Kal v'chomer. He says, Kal v'chomer mitfilah. I have a Kal v'chomer from Tefillah. What's the Kal v'chomer? Ma Tefillah de'ikar takanteh. The Tefillah, saying Havdalah in the Tefillah, it was the main takana. The last takana was that you always need to go ahead and say Havdalah in the Tefillah, which means to say, the rabbi said the following, even when the people became rich at the end, and they're able to afford, what happened was, remember, there was 3 steps. There was, first, they only instituted in Tefillah. Then they became wealthy, the community. They removed it totally from Tefillah, and they put it into a cup of wine. No Tefillah. Then the 3rd stage was the people became poor again, and what did they do? They instituted in Tefillah. But even when they instituted in Tefillah, they did not say Tefillah, and they did not say just Tefillah. They said that if you become rich again, you will still have to do it in Tefillah. They said you still have to do it in Tefillah. That means they said that Tefillah in the praise, you always have to, from now on, you always need to do Atachanatanu in Tefillah. We're never removing it from Tefillah. Originally, when they became wealthy, they said they don't have to do it in Tefillah. Then they became poor, they said put it in Tefillah. And they said now that we put it back in Tefillah, we're going to leave it there, L'olam v'ed. We're going to leave it in tefillah forever. You're going to have to say Atachanatanu in the Amidah forever and ever, even when you become wealthy. That's what they said. They said that this is going to become the main takana is in the tefillah. So now, it comes out that the idea of saying Havdalah in tefillah, saying Atachanatanu, becomes the main enactment. That's the main obligation. Because you always have to do it. Now, when it comes to wine depends. When do you have to do it on a cup of wine? Depends if you could afford the cup of wine or not. So you see the difference so far. We have a difference between Havdalah, Atachanatanu, and Tefillah, and the difference of Havdalah on a cup of wine. Cup of wine depends. It depends if people can afford. Havdalah and Tefillah, Atachanatanu, is a constant. You always have to do Atachanatanu in Tefillah. Always. So now the Gemara says, Uma Tefillah, De'ika takantehi. So I just proved to you that the Atachanatanu in Tefillah is the main takana, because that is always has to be done in Tefillah. Forever. You have to say it in Tefillah. Amri. Even though that's the main takana, they said Hamavdil b'Tefillah. They said if you made Havdalah in the Tefillah and you fulfilled the basic obligation in a certain sense, but they still this basic takana, but they still said that even when you said it in Tefillah, Sarich sheyavdil alakos. If you could afford, you have to do it on a cup of wine. So the Gemara says, being that's the case, that I proved to you that Tefillah, saying Atachanatanu in Tefillah is the main takana, because it's always the obligation saying in Tefillah. So Hamavdil alakos. If a person only made Havdalah on a cup of wine, which is not the main takana, so the lav ikatakantehi, which is not the main takana, lo kol shekain, don't you think we should definitely have to go ahead and say it in the Amidah? And therefore, the Gemara wants to say this Kal V'chomer. Does everyone hear the Kal V'chomer? The Kal V'chomer is that saying Atachanatanu in the Amidah is the main takana, and still you have to do it on the cup of wine. So wine is not, in a certain sense, now that the tables are turned, the Gemara is looking at Atachanatanu and Tefillah in a certain sense is a greater status than a cup of wine, because the main takana was in the Tefillah. So and yet you still do it on the cup of wine. So if you said it on the cup of wine, you certainly have to do it in the Tefillah, because the Tefillah is the main takana. And it could be that even though I built the case that if you do it on a cup of wine, shouldn't that be all inclusive, include everything? But maybe the idea is, at the end of the day, a cup of wine is not the Amidah. It's not the Amidah. There's something unique and special when you say Atachanatanu in the holy place that we call the Amidah. We call the Shemona Esrei. And that's more powerful in a certain sense, or that has a higher status, or that's the Ikar Takana that you can't accomplish what you could accomplish by making this insert in the Tefillah. How do you like that, Avram? You like that shot? What you could accomplish by saying it in Amidah, you can't accomplish it over a cup of wine. Even though the cup of wine is more grandeur, whatever the expression is, it's over a cup of wine. It's got a nice expensive bottle of wine. He do a mitzvah, right? He took out a nice bottle of wine, right, Mike? He took out a nice bottle of wine for Havdalah last night. But nevertheless, it's not in the Amidah. It's not in the Amidah. Joseph, you hear me?
Rabbi.
Yes.
So we had one case that the person forgets in the Amidah, and then he is able to catch it up onto the Havdalah, right? So he doesn't repeat the Amidah. And case number 2 is the other way around. He did the Havdalah first, and then he's going to do the Amidah. And so what's the question? So let's say he does the Amidah. Of course he's going to do Atachanatanu. It doesn't hurt. He must do it, basically.
That's the question. The Gemara's question is, maybe once I said on the cup of wine, maybe I don't need to do it in Amidah. Maybe the cup of wine is so.
Yeah, but there's not the name of God over there, right? I think so. It cannot be so. It's even if it was not, it sounds like it's mandatory. But if it was not, it wouldn't hurt to mention it.
I mean, there's no bracha. The insert is not a bracha. It's an insert, but Hashem. But still, the question is it saying? Am I saying something that doesn't need to be said? Am I saying extra words in the Amidah? Meaning the Gemara's question, we don't say extra words that's not necessary. You hear what I'm saying, Mike?
Wow.
Rabbi, I always thought
Yes.
about with the Atachonantano and Mariv, that's an entity in of itself, meaning the chashivut that we give it. If you did not say Atachonantano, you automatically have to repeat the Shemona Esrei, and that's the determining factor of the difference between Hamavdil ben Kodesh L'chol. Right? Like that takes precedence, saying the Atachonantano. If you said Atachonen and you omitted it, then you have to 100% do a chazara of the whole Shemona Esrei.
No, but the Gemara says you don't need to do the chazara because you're going to do it on the cup of wine.
Okay, all right. But I'm saying though that
meaning if you would not do it on the cup of wine, then it would be then you maybe you would need a chazara.
Well, you're saying that you couldn't still do the chazara of the Shemona Esrei and then also do the Havdalah. You're saying you just don't have to at all. That's basically
right. You would not do the chazara. You're going to say Havdalah on the cup of wine. Correct.
Right. But what if you caught yourself within the Shemona Esrei that you didn't say it before? It's over. You're up to like modim.
You would not repeat. You would not go back. You just continue, and then you remember you'll do it on the cup of wine.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So now the Gemara continues. Tani, so I think this gives us, by the way, a total different appreciation of Atachanatanu. To realize that this is Atachanatanu is the main takana. Yeah, we have to keep that in mind. The Gemara continues. Tani Rav Acha Aricha Kamed Rav Chanina. Rav Acha Aricha said he was very tall, and they referred to him as Rav Acha, the tall man. Kamed Rav Chanina. Hamavdil betfilah. He said the following: if you make havdalah in the tfilah, if you say Atachanatanu, Mishubach yoter mimi sheyavdal al kos bilvad. It's better than saying havdalah only on a cup of wine. If I went ahead and I said Atachanatanu in tefillah, if I have that on one side of the scale, standing in is havdalah in tefillah. And then I have on the other side of the other side of the coin, I made havdalah on a cup of wine. Which is greater? Which is more powerful? Which is a bigger mitzvah? If I said havdalah in the abidah, or I said havdalah on the cup of wine, which one is greater? So this rabbi says, and this is like based on similar to our Gemara in a certain sense, that the main takana is in the tefillah. The main takana is in tefillah. So if a person went ahead and one person, if one person did not say it in the Amidah, he didn't say it in the Amidah, he forgot it in the Amidah, and he only said it on the cup of wine. He forgot it in the Amidah. The other guy said it in the Amidah. Who did a stronger mitzvah? The one who said it in the Midah is greater than the one who said it only on the cup of wine. Based on our Gemara, because that's the main takana. The main takana is where? In the Midah. Now, but the Gemara's question is going to be, what do you mean if you tell me this is better than that? It sounds like that this is fine. It's good enough if you just did it in the Midah. It's just this is better than that, but it sounds like it's sufficient. It sounds like it's sufficient just to do it on Amidah. And you told me a few minutes ago that you can't just do it in Amidah. You have to not only do it on Amidah, you have to also do it where? On the cup of wine. So that's going to be the Gemara's challenge. The Gemara is questioning what we said before.
Halacha lamaisa, though, if you do just say it in the Amida, if a person would not say Havdalah, he's still able, there is a separation for him. He's able to do malacha, right? After
He's able to malacha, but he can't go ahead and eat until he does Havdalah on the cup of wine. He can't eat and drink. But we hold the halacha. You have to do both in the Amidah, at the Chanatanu, and on a cup of wine. The Gemara is challenging this. We know how we act in practice, but the Gemara is developing the law. The Gemara is challenging what we understand that we do. The Gemara is bringing a different opinion that disagrees with this, that does not require Havdalah both in the Amidah and both on the cup of wine. That's what the Gemara is showing. And the Gemara says that even this opinion that says that you do not need to do it in both, but he will agree that that this opinion would say if you did both, you get a bracha. Like you say, like Rabbi Vadia says, tova love bracha. So this opinion is saying you're not required to do both, but the hivdil bezu, if you did have Havdalah both in this one and that one, both in the Amidah and on the cup of wine, hivdil bezu yanucha lo brochot arosho. He should have a lot of bracha on his head. Hashem should give him a lot of bracha. So now, the Gemara says, Hagufa kasha. The Gemara says there seems to be a contradiction. Amrit, you said hamavdil b'tfilah. If you said Havdalah in the prayer, mishubach yoter mimishi Havdalah kos. You said if you made Havdalah in the prayer, it's better, it's greater than somebody who makes it on a cup of wine. So if you tell me this is better than that, it sounds like that this alone is sufficient. I could just do it in the tefillah, or I could just do it in the Amidah. I just do it in a cup of wine. I don't have to do both. But you tell me this is better than that. Alma tefillah l'chuda sagi. We see it's sufficient just to make Havdalah in Atachanatanu is enough. Because you tell me saying Atachanatanu and Amidah is better than doing it on a cup of wine. So that means it's enough. But then you told me, Vadatani, then you told me if I went ahead and I said Havdalah both in the Atachanatanu and on the cup of wine, I did a great thing. So the Gemara's question is, if I fulfilled my obligation by going ahead, if you're telling me I fulfilled my obligation by doing it in Amidah, by saying Atachanatanu, how could you say I get a bracha for doing it on the cup of wine? It's a bracha levatala. If I'm able to fulfill my obligation, if my obligation is only in the tefillah, and that's sufficient, how could you tell me that I'm doing a good thing when I do it additionally I do it on a cup of wine? It's a bracha levatala. In the cup of wine we say bracha Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kol shechor ben ol l'choshech. But if I fulfill my obligation by saying it in the Atachanatanu, so then I should not be able to say it in the cup of wine. That's the Gemara's question. Kivan v'hadatani hivdil bezu yenuchalo bracha darosho. Kivan enofek lebachada. Since I fulfilled my obligation by just saying it by doing one thing, if that I fulfilled my obligation of Havdalah, havi bracha she'eina tzricha. Then it comes out it's a bracha that's not needed. V'omar Rav itema Reish Lakish Amri la Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish David Havayu Kol HaMevarech bracha she'eina tzricha. If someone says a bracha that's not needed, uveh mishum lo sisa. Hashem says in the 10 Commandments, don't use my name in vain. So how could the writer say that if I did both, you see, how could the writer say if I did both, I could get a bracha for that? If I did both, I'm saying if I'm able to fulfill my obligation, I'm going to give you an example. You have an apple and an orange in front of you. What's the bracha on an apple? Ha'etz. What's the bracha of an orange? A borei pri ha'etz. So if I go ahead and I say, you know what? I say a bracha on the apple. Bracha ta Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz. And then I go ahead and I say I'm going to make another bracha on the orange. Borei pri ha'etz. There was no need. I already said a bracha on the apple. That was in front of me. And both brachos were in front of me. I had in mind to eat both. I don't need to make a bracha on the orange because I made a bracha on the boyer pre'etz. And the boyer pre'etz and the apple covers the apple and it covers the orange. So if I go ahead and I say the bracha on the apple and I say another bracha on the other food, I'm saying a bracha levatala. Now, it's interesting that this of the 10 Commandments, L'sisa Hashem Elokecha L'Shav, is talking about not making a false, using God's name and saying an oath, saying a shvu'ah. That's what the pasuk seems to be talking about. And the Gemara says that it's not only referring to using God's name in an oath in vain. Let's say a guy goes ahead and he says, he swears that this chair is a chair, right? Why are you swearing that the chair is a chair? Everyone knows the chair is a chair. So you use God's name, you swore about the chair that the chair is a chair, and you use God's name in vain. So it not only is it considered a problem when you swear about it, a chair is a chair, something that everyone knows. It's also if you take God's name and you use God's name in vain, again, it's in vain. Not because you used it in the text of it, using it as an oath, but use God's name in vain by going ahead and saying God's name when it wasn't necessary. That's a bracha she'eina tzricha. That's the Rambam's understanding. Tosfos holds that if you say a bracha in vain, it's not a biblical violation, it's a rabbinic obligation, because the Torah does not, this pasuk really is referring to saying an oath in vain, when it says, Osisa Hashem Elokecha Hashav. The Gemara uses this as an asmachta. A lot of times when the rabbis make an enactment, forbade certain things, they like to see that it's alluded to in the Torah, it's hinted to. So this pasuk of Osisa Hashem Elokecha Hashav is like a hint to the idea of if you use God's name in vain, it's a big sin. But not necessarily that this is exactly the usage of this. It doesn't mean that this act of saying a bracha that's not needed is a violation of Losisa es Hashem Elokecha L'Shav. It's something that it's similar to it, but might not be an actual application of that verse. At the end of the day, saying a bracha that's not she'eina tzricha, that's not needed, is a question are you violating a biblical prohibition if you say a bracha that's not needed, or rabbinic prohibition? And therefore, a lot of times when we have the rule, Safek brachot l'hakel, one reason is because it's a derabanan, Safek brachot in general l'hakel, but a lot of times they also come into this issue, also plays a role, this issue of maybe I'm going to violate this idea of losisa as using Hashem's name in vain. If I don't need to say a bracha, and I say a bracha, I could be violating a biblical prohibition according to the Rambam of losisa as Hashem Elokecha L'Shav. Therefore, we got to be very careful. Sometimes we make a bracha on food, and then we had in mind all the foods that we're going to eat that have the same bracha. Then again, we make the same bracha, we make a second time. Why did you make the bracha? I already said a shakol on the drink, and then I said a shakol on the meat. What do you say a shakol on the meat? You knew you were having meat. You knew you were having chicken. What do you say a shakol again? That's a bracha she'eina tzricha. It's a serious thing to say a bracha that's not needed. We see from our Gemara. People have to be very careful. Is that clear to everybody what we see from our Gemara? Mike, you see that? Yosef at Tzaddik.
Yes.
What's
Thank
going
you.
on over in the Gemara?
Yep.
The Gemara is saying you got to be very careful about a bracha she'eina tzricha. So that's what.
Rabbi,
Yes.
can we ask you something like irrelevant to all this, because it's really bothered me, and
Yes.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure like 10% of people in the area on the call. I'm really having visiting.
Yosef, just wait 1 second. I want to finish this point.
Okay. Sorry.
So the Gemara says, Ela ema hachi im hivdil bezu v'lo bezu yenucha lo barosha arosho. So the Gemara says you have to read the Braita differently. Not that you can do Havdalah on both, and you'll get blessings for it. No. According to this Braita, you do not need, if you say Havdalah in the Tefillah, you do not need to say it on the coast. This Braita holds you don't need to do it on the coast. It's one or the other. And therefore, according to this Braita, if you said Atachanatonu in the Tefillah, you do not need to say it on the coast, and you're not supposed to say it on the coast. And therefore, he says you're going to get a bracha for not doing it again, for not wasting Hashem's name in vain. You're going to get a bracha. If you did have Havdalah in the Tefillah and you did not do it on the cup of wine, look at that irony. You're going to get a if you did it in the cup of wine on the Tefillah and not on the cup of wine, that you're getting a blessing for not wasting Hashem's name in vain. Is that clear? That's what this Gemara holds. So this is arguing on what we said before. Before we said that if you make Havdalah on Tefillah in your prayers at the Chanukah, you still have to say it on the cup of wine. And this opinion disagrees. This opinion says no. You do only one. You don't need to do it. And since one is enough, if you go ahead and you say the next one, if you do it at the Chanukah, the Tefillah, and also on the cup of wine, that's a bracha levatala. That's what this opinion holds. Again, that's not the halacha. But now let's get Yosef. What do you want to say, Yosef?
So, we're coming to Pesach, and Pesach it's coming out on Motzei Shabbat. Now, most probably everybody know that you have to clean your home and to finish cleaning before Shabbat. Now, and that means taking us also to Biur Chametz. It's happening on Friday, and the Chipus of the Chametz will be on Thursday night.
Right.
Now, but Shabbat is coming before everything else. So, and there is a kind of obligation to do a motzi on Shabbat.
Right.
So how do you do Biur Chametz and you're still doing hamotzi on Shabbat? And I don't know if it's obligation for Shabbat day, but there is Shabbat only night at least. We say that it's not really, but it's recommended to do it on Shabbat. And how do you own chametz, basically, if you already sold your chametz and you already did the biur chametz?
That's very good. So the answer to the question is the following. You're only selling the chametz that you don't plan on eating. The chametz that you plan on eating, you never sold that chametz, okay? So whatever chametz you're eating and you're leaving chametz, let's say you're leaving a couple of rolls for Friday night. And you're leaving, let's say, a couple of rolls for Shabbat morning, early in the morning. Because you have to stop eating chametz, let's say, by 10:25. So if you plan on eating chametz Friday night and Shabbat morning, you have a right to eat chametz Friday night and Shabbat morning. Burning the chametz you had to do on Friday morning. But Friday night, you are still allowed to eat chametz. Shabbat morning until 10:25 you eat chametz. But the only thing that you're going to have chametz, everything else is going to be Pesach. You're only going to have the challah rolls will be chametz. And then by 10:25, you finish eating the challah rolls. If you have anything left, any crumbs or anything left, you flush it down the toilet, and then that's finishing getting rid of the chametz. That's called getting rid of the chametz. So you have a right to eat the chametz Friday night. You have a right to eat chametz Shabbat morning because the time that you're not allowed to eat chametz begins at, let's say, 10:25 Shabbat morning. So you can have a chametz. Technically, you could eat chametz Friday night. You didn't sell that chametz. That's not what's part of your sale. And you know what? After you finish eating the chametz Shabbat morning by 10:25, you flush it down the toilet, and then you say kol chamira, the second kol chamira. Kol chamira v'chamira dika b'shuti de lo chazite de chazite de yadate v'lo yadate. Any chametz that I know about, that I don't know about, I'm nullifying. I'm giving up. I'm making hefker. That's
okay.
That's what you're doing at that point. You're giving up any chametz that you're making hefker any chametz. Whatever you sold that you knew about that you sold. But you're going to be making a bitul. You're going to make hefker Shabbat morning.
Okay.
Is it
kind of like bothering is like how you do both and like you're still honoring Shabbat and you own the chametz, but you can't do biur chametz.
The only chametz that you're going to own on Shabbat is the challah rolls, if you're going to use challah rolls. Other people, some people in the Ashkenaz community, I wonder what they do by the Sfardim. Some people use egg matzah Friday night and Shabbat morning. They use egg
Okay.
matzah for the Sudah. And
Okay.
now the Sfardim eat egg matzah throughout Pesach, correct?
I think so.
I think so. Sfardim eat egg. We Ashkenazim don't. I'm saying the Sfardim maybe they, but you got to. I'm not familiar with how the Sfardim look at the egg matzah, but in the Ashkenaz community, there's some people that will be using egg matzah Friday night and Shabbat morning. But among the Ashkenazim, we do not eat egg matzah after 10:25 in the morning. Only the sick people are lenient for egg matzah after throughout Pesach. But Ashkenazim, we eat egg matzah past 10:25 about morning. So there'll be people that will use egg matzah instead of
Give somebody toys. How come you're not buying them?
I presume that's what some of the Sfardim are going to do also. You got to check that out. That might make it easier, but some people are afraid of the confusion of having space in their house. So what they do is they use egg matzah. You hear what I'm saying, Dave?
Yes, I can. I'm not familiar with that, to be honest with you. Like, it's been a long time since I've been at home with my parents to see what they've done,
Right. It could be. I'm gonna look into it for the Sfardim, but it could be that might be also a very good option for the Sfardim to use the egg matzah.
Okay, and
You're not allowed to eat regular matzah on Erev Pesach. Regular matzah, normal matzah is not allowed to be eaten Erev Pesach. Erev Pesach, you're not allowed to eat regular matzah because it has to be special for the night of Pesach. And therefore, it's only special if you did not eat it the whole day. If you ate it that day, then it's not special. It's not unique. And therefore, you have to have it. So therefore, we do not eat regular matzah on Erev Pesach. But
Erev Pesach, I mean the day before the night, on Shabbat day.
You do not eat regular matzah from Shabbat morning, and some people will not eat regular matzah from Friday night. They wouldn't already eat regular matzah. Some people refrain from eating regular matzah, shmura matzah, or regular matzah. When do there are different minhagim. Some people stop 30 days before. Some people start Rosh Chodesh Nisan, they stop eating. But everybody has a minhag that the bare minimum to stop eating regular matzah is Erev Pesach. And even Erev Pesach, there are different opinions. When do you have to stop Erev Pesach? Do you have to stop the night before? Do you have to stop in the morning? Or do you have to stop from 10:25 on? So there's three different opinions. When do I have to stop eating regular matzah? Most opinions is starting from the morning Erev Pesach. You have to stop eating regular matzah. I can't have my regular matzah Shabbat morning.
I got you. Okay.
I can't have regular matzah.
Yeah.
We have a question. What can I use? Challah, bread, and they stop by canceling. Others use egg matzah.
Understand. Okay. Yeah, it's like always Pesach is in a way the worst holiday to do all the preparation because there is so much details and cleaning and everything. It's like it's like really getting from Avdut.
Yosef, it's beautiful. There's a lot of great things that we got to do. We got a big mitzvah. We have an opportunity to do a great mitzvah. That's great. Yeah, it's the attitude, right?
Yeah, it's like the attitude. There is always a benefit in every hard work.
Exactly. But you know what? If we do hard work to get rid of the chametz, there's two types of chametz. The physical chametz that we got to get rid of, and there's the spiritual chametz, Yosef. You're a mekubal. You know about the spiritual chametz. When we get rid of the physical chametz, we got to think about what spiritual chametz, what spiritual imperfections that we have that we got to get rid of. That's what to think about. Not just think about, and therefore, you see, with hard work, we can get rid of the physical chametz. With hard work, we can get rid of the spiritual chametz. People have different things that they have to improve in life. They could be better people if they get rid of if they work on themselves the same way they work on the physical chametz. They got to get rid of the spiritual chametz that they have. Maybe they have a temper. maybe they're not patient, maybe they say things they shouldn't say, maybe whatever everybody has different issues in life that they have to work on. But with hard work, you can be successful. How do you like that?
Of course, I like it a lot.
But you have to search. We have to look into ourselves the same way we search for chametz. We have to search our own chametz. That's within us. All right, Yosef?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. It's a daily work, basically. It's not like nonstop.
You got
it. How do you say? I got it matzata, lo matzata.
Exactly. Okay, I want to wish everyone a beautiful day. It's so good to have Joseph on. Joseph, thank you for joining us again. So we look forward
Thank you, Rabbi. It's a zechut, and it's a zechut to see you every day at Safra. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.
We just wish to see face of Joseph next time.
Joseph misses Joseph's face. There
Hati.
You see
We
the
can't
holy
hear you,
face?
Joseph. You can talk to yourself only.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a great day, everybody.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.